My wife had a brief affair with her boss, believing I was oblivious to it the whole time. She was mistaken. While she was with her lover, I was devising a plan for retribution. I'm not naturally vindictive, but when it comes to my family, I can't hold back. Last July, I painfully discovered my wife's infidelity, and since then, I've been enduring immense anguish. I had no suspicion at all. At first, I couldn't believe my wife would betray me like that. Throughout our 8-year marriage, I was genuinely happy. Renowned psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross suggested that when facing death or another significant tragedy, people go through a series of emotional stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I remembered learning about this in a college psychology class. Denial is the first stage, and I was deeply entrenched in it. If Mary was truly unfaithful, it would mean the end of our marriage, yet I struggled to accept this. I wondered if I would experience all the stages of grief over the loss of our love, and if, upon reaching acceptance, the pain and heartache would ever fade. In college, I crossed paths with Mary while pursuing computer science. I found myself obliged to enroll in an English class as part of the general education curriculum. Initially, I harbored little enthusiasm for delving into the works of ancient poets and authors. My mind seemed occupied solely with computer code and social events. As a stereotypical computer enthusiast, I was tall and somewhat awkward. Academically, I was average, never excelling in sports or extracurricular activities. However, my forte lay in computer tutoring, rendering me a recognizable figure among peers, albeit one whose name often escaped their memory. My romantic history was limited to brief encounters with Pauline French after high school graduation. It seemed she took pity on me, and we spent a couple of months together before she moved on. Subsequently, my fellow computer enthusiasts and I regaled each other with tales of prowess in matters of love, imagining scenarios with classmates we admired. Meeting Mary was a turning point in my life. Sitting beside her in English class, I found myself captivated by her deep hazel eyes. I couldn't look away, lost in their depths throughout the entire lesson. It wasn't until she was leaving that I finally took in the rest of her features. Mary had shoulder-length blonde hair with a subtle curl, a cute button nose, and lips that always seemed to curve upward. Though not as tall as me, I estimated her height at around 5 feet 7 inches. While I wasn't particularly experienced in assessing such things, I couldn't help but notice how well she filled out her shirt. Her lower half was encased in snug jeans that accentuated her figure perfectly. To me, she was flawless. From then on, I made a conscious effort to sit next to her every day. After a month, she initiated a conversation, noticing my calculus books and asking if I could tutor her in college algebra, a subject she was struggling with and needed to pass to graduate. I would have agreed to anything she asked. We started meeting in the library on Tuesdays and Thursdays after class for study sessions. Despite my attempts to stay focused, having the most beautiful girl by my side turned my brain to mush. Somehow, though, it seemed to work, as Mary ended up scoring a B on her midterm test, much to her delight. When she found out, she couldn't contain her joy, jumping up and down and enveloping me in a hug. The sensation of her kissing my cheek made me feel like I was in paradise. Then I said something completely unexpected for me. "Would you like to catch a movie on Friday?" "Sure, what time?" "Wait, what?" I stumbled. I said yes, dummy. I practically floated back to my dorm room. The following week felt like a blur. I even went shopping for a new pair of Dockers and a polo shirt. My geeky friends teased me endlessly, but I took it in stride. I was eagerly anticipating the minutes until our date. Somehow, I made it to Friday night. Our first date was to see the latest Halloween movie. Not exactly highbrow entertainment, it was your typical slasher flick with gore, dismemberments, and cliched characters. I thought she might cling to me out of fear, but she didn't seem too fazed. Nonetheless, we had a blast. Mary and I whispered about who would be the next victim on screen, and more often than not, she was right. Later, I got a quick goodnight kiss on her doorstep. During our fourth date, she welcomed me into her dorm room, and we awkwardly expressed our love physically. It seemed to have left a positive impression on her because she invited me back after our subsequent date. From then on, we transitioned into a relationship. Surprisingly, we shared many interests, we enjoyed the same movies, read similar books, and had a mutual love for certain foods. After a few months, I found myself deeply in love. As finals approached, I was convinced she felt the same way about me. We were happy just before the Christmas break. As we lay in her bed, I confessed my love for her, telling her she was the best thing that ever happened to me. She smiled and reciprocated, saying, "I love you too." Life felt perfect. Despite not having any classes together in the spring semester, we continued studying together in the library every day after classes, resuming where we left off after the break. Our love only grew stronger each passing week. We spent spring break together, renting a cabin by the lake. Although I had plans for hiking and fishing, we ended up staying inside the cabin the entire week. On the final night, I dropped to one knee and proposed. She accepted. 3 months later, we graduated, and 5 months after that, we were married. After finishing school, I landed a job in computer security. Our company specialized in integrating security software into the computer systems of small businesses ranging from 10 to 50 workstations. My responsibility involved writing code to facilitate communication between different systems. My supervisor was Bob. Bob established the company a decade ago with just 2 employees. Through several mergers and acquisitions, the company expanded to around 50 employees and flourished. Bob was not only a competent boss but also a valuable mentor. About 5 years into my tenure, Bob received an offer to sell the company. He explained that a prominent venture capital firm in the city sought our foothold in the small business market to complement their larger computer division. The financial incentives were too enticing to decline, so he sold the company. However, he remained as the manager, ensuring that all of us retained our positions. The transition was smooth, with minimal disruption to our work routine. We seldom encountered the new owners, and Bob continued to oversee operations according to his established methods. Soon after graduating, Mary secured a job as the office manager for Dr. Hubert, a dentist. Her supervisor was a genial elderly dentist who resembled the archetype of the absent-minded professor, complete with the comical spectacle of constantly searching for his glasses. Despite his perpetually bewildered demeanor, Dr. Hubert possessed exceptional dental skills, attracting patients from afar due to his reputation for excellence in dentistry, provided they managed to secure an appointment. When Mary started working there, the office was in disarray, bills went unpaid, files were misplaced, and the billing systems were outdated. It was chaos. Mary took on the task of organizing and improving the office, leading to remarkable results. Within 3 years, the doctor's practice had undergone a transformation, becoming the envy of the region. Revenue increased, office turnover ceased, morale soared, and even the doctor's appearance improved. Mary was credited with it all, and I couldn't have been prouder of her. After we tied the knot, Mary and I settled into a small apartment close to my workplace. We made the most of every inch of space, creating memories in every corner. We both agreed to focus on advancing our careers before starting a family. Each year, we treated ourselves to a vacation around our anniversary. In the beginning, our budget was tight, so we often retreated to our cabin by the lake. Over time, our vacations became more luxurious, culminating in a trip to Disney World in Florida one year. After 5 years in the apartment, we decided it was time to look for a house. After searching for a couple of months, we found a cozy home with enough space for our future family. We moved in and once again filled every room with our love and intimacy. Following approximately 7 years, Mary returned home from her employment imbued with considerable enthusiasm. The commendable management and operational efficacy demonstrated within the esteemed medical practitioner's establishment had garnered attention. Notably, the doctor counted among his clientele certain influential executive figures who, having observed the remarkable transformation within the office, proceeded to relay their favorable impressions to the doctor himself. Dr. Hubert, in turn, expressed an unequivocal commendation for Mary's contributions. Subsequently, one of the aforementioned executives extended to Mary a proposition of employment. Subsequent deliberations ensued, spanning the course of that evening and several ensuing days. A pivotal consideration arose concerning the potential impact of accepting the offer vis-a-vis our familial aspirations. I harbored the sentiment that such a career move might potentially defer our plans for initiating a family by a substantial duration. Financial exigency did not appear to mandate immediate acceptance, particularly considering the familial affinity established with Dr. Hubert. Conversely, Mary articulated a contrasting viewpoint, emphasizing the prospective avenues for professional advancement that the offered role might afford. She proposed a deferment of our familial plans for a brief interim, pledging to ameliorate any perceived setback incurred thereby. I found myself with little choice but to acquiesce. A month later, Mary took on the role of personal assistant to Dana Larson, the vice president of finance at Cascade Capital. Unbeknownst to me at the time, Cascade Capital was the venture capital firm that ultimately owned the company where I was already employed. Initially, I didn't detect any changes in Mary or in our relationship. Although our intimacy dwindled, I attributed it to the irregular hours she and her boss kept. Sometimes she had to attend meetings with him well into the evening, leaving her exhausted upon her return home. However, over time, our bed life deteriorated even more. Despite my attempts to reconnect with Mary, she rebuffed all of my advances. I don't recall us being intimate for the 2 months leading up to the awards dinner. The notion of her being unfaithful was so foreign to me that it never even crossed my mind. I discovered that Mary was having an affair with her boss on the day of her company's annual awards dinner. I couldn't bring myself to believe it. Every year, her company hosts a dinner to celebrate the previous year's achievements and acknowledge key figures. We had been invited to attend. As we were getting ready to leave, I still struggled to accept that Mary was being unfaithful. I mentally reviewed the past few months but couldn't recall any signs. Our love for each other was deep, I trusted her completely and never doubted her loyalty. In hindsight, I realize I might have been blinded by love. I needed concrete evidence of Mary's infidelity, something I could witness with my own eyes. So, I pushed aside my doubts and focused on getting ready for the dinner. I observed Mary closely as she prepared, taking note of every detail, her outfit, makeup, even her choice of lingerie. During the drive, I remained mostly silent. Mary was excited because her boss, Mr. Larson, was receiving an award, perhaps for highest profits or maybe for most affairs if the rumors were true. My anger would undoubtedly surface soon, however, I knew I needed to remain composed to gather the truth. In that moment, I understood how Bruce Banner must have felt. We arrived precisely on schedule following Mary's meticulous planning. Upon arrival, Mary immediately attended to ensuring everything was running smoothly, leaving me to observe. After about 15 minutes, he entered, accompanied by his stunning wife. Why did he require Mary's assistance when he had such a gem waiting for him at home? I made my way to the bar, ordered a drink, and studied him closely. I noticed how people flocked to him, treating him like royalty, sycophantic behavior towards the boss. I observed his insincere smiles, his efforts to please everyone. I despised him. Mary swiftly joined him while Larson's wife, Caroline, mingled with other executives' spouses. From a distance, I observed Larson and Mary's interactions, exchanging glances, subtle touches, and genuine smiles. It was clearly more than a typical boss-assistant dynamic. As dinner commenced, Larson and his wife occupied the head table with us nearby. Mary strategically chose a seat facing Larson. The evening unfolded into a tedious awards banquet featuring mundane speeches and unremarkable fare. Following dinner, tables were cleared for dancing. I attempted to keep Mary by my side, but she frequently had to assist Larson with various tasks. Whenever they were together, I tried to monitor them, but distractions often interfered. Mary's colleagues approached me for conversation, hindering my constant surveillance. Mary and I danced a few times, both slow and fast songs, sometimes close, sometimes at a distance. As midnight approached, I grew weary. I suggested we leave, and eventually Mary reluctantly agreed. But before departing, she requested one final dance. The dance floor was where everything fell apart for me. Mary, without her underwear, shattered my world. Throughout the previous dances, I could sense she wore panties, but now her backside felt bare. There was no sign of the blue thong she had put on earlier. It devastated me. In all our time together, I had never known her to go without underwear. Even when I asked, she always refused. But somehow, she did it for him. After saying our goodbyes, we left. The drive home was silent, each lost in our own thoughts. But for me, it was a personal hell. Once home, Mary hurried upstairs, mentioning something about needing a shower before bed. I muttered a reply, but it hardly mattered anymore. I shed my suit, hung it up, and slipped into bed. A few minutes later, Mary joined me wearing her long cotton nightgown. Leaning over, she whispered, "Wasn't that a glorious night?" I pretended to be asleep. She kissed my cheek and turned away, her breathing soon indicating sleep. That's when the tears began, soaking my pillow. The following morning, while standing beneath the scalding streams of my shower, I believed I traversed the entire spectrum of human emotion: love, hatred, fury, anguish, followed by thoughts of retribution mingled with fleeting notions of forgiveness. Feelings of inadequacy for failing to retain my partner's loyalty, a sense of foolishness for not discerning her deception sooner, and ultimately a sense of triumph in uncovering the truth. My mind was a tumult of conflicting sentiments, a cacophony of thoughts reverberating within. By the end of the shower, anger prevailed. He would face consequences somehow. In the ensuing days, I sought avenues to inflict suffering upon him for his transgressions against my marriage. Murder was not an option, and I doubted my ability to ambush him with a lead pipe to his knees. There had to be another way. I acknowledged Mary's complicity in this debacle. She had deceived me, violating her vows of fidelity. I reflected on our shared history, questioning where I faltered, what led to her loss of respect, and when it occurred. Did she succumb to his wealth and influence? I had placed my trust in her, investing years of my life because I believed in her, years I could never retrieve. They would both face retribution. A few days later, the solution revealed itself. Mary had gone to the shopping mall, supposedly for new shoes, or so she said. However, her laptop sat on the counter, offering an opportunity. If I could penetrate their company's system, perhaps I could enact revenge. Given my expertise in computer security, hacking their system seemed within reach. I powered up her laptop, connected to her work network, and awaited the password prompt. Knowing Mary, her password likely wouldn't pose a significant challenge. Yet, before I initiated my first attempt, I noticed her day planner nearby. Married to a computer security expert, Mary surely wouldn't violate the cardinal rule of password security, would she? I flipped through the day planner, locating the section under P, where, as expected, her password was plainly written. As I perused further, I stumbled upon a treasure trove, not only her login credentials but Larson's as well, along with credit card numbers, bank accounts, birth dates, and social security numbers. Hastily, I made a trip to Kinko's to photocopy every page of her day planner. I reserved further exploration of their system for another occasion. A few days later, the opportunity arose again. Mary left her computer unattended on the counter as she stepped out. Seizing the moment, I powered it on and accessed her account using her password. Given her position working for the vice president, she had nearly unrestricted access to the entire system, including payroll, purchasing, accounting, and much of the production systems. Navigating through the email system, I skimmed through without delving into Mary's personal correspondence. I had no desire to pry into the details of her personal affairs, especially as I was struggling just to keep my composure. I was convinced there must be a way to exact revenge hidden within this labyrinth of data. My attention turned to the accounting system, which, to my surprise, was rather rudimentary and lacked robust security measures. Perhaps there lay the key to my payback. Similarly, a glance at the purchasing system revealed a process where invoices required approval before payment, a potential vulnerability. The plan crystallized in my mind: tamper with approved invoices, reroute funds to Larson's account, and await the inevitable discovery by auditors. It was a stroke of genius. Larson's reputation would be tarnished, Mary would lose her job, and their illicit affair would come to a screeching halt. The following day, I executed my scheme meticulously. Utilizing details from Mary's day planner, I created accounts in Larson's name at 2 different downtown banks. Armed with this information, all that remained was gaining access to Mary's computer to finalize the transfer. The following day, while Mary was at the gym, I took action. I used Larson's password to log in and proceeded straight to the accounting system. There, I located an approved invoice and accessed it. This invoice included a section for a manufacturer rebate. I inputted a 3% rebate along with Larson's bank details into the bank routing field, thinking that such a small percentage wouldn't immediately raise suspicion. I repeated the process with another invoice, directing the rebate to a different bank account. After exiting the system, I poured myself a drink, opting for the good scotch this time. The first drink was a toast to my well-executed plan, while the second was to help me cope with thoughts of my failed marriage. I waited a few days, but nothing changed: no police visits, no newspaper headlines, absolutely nothing. Damn. Maybe the plan was solid, just not grand enough. Seizing the opportunity, I accessed Mary's computer, made a few adjustments to some more invoices, and slipped in and out swiftly. Still nothing. Perhaps raising the rebate to 4% would do the trick. The following day, I infiltrated the system again, added a 4% rebate to 2 invoices, and exited swiftly. Our home life was strained. I had ceased initiating intimacy with Mary, and she never initiated with me either. I found solace in staying up late at night, engrossed in games featuring the Bulls, Blackhawks, Bears, or any other match that was on with cable. There was always some game to captivate me. Mary remarked on my newfound interest in sports. I explained that these games were significant and that everyone at work followed them closely. I found it incredibly difficult to even make physical contact with Mary. The idea that she had given what was once mine to someone else made me feel dizzy. After a hug or a quick kiss, I often found myself rushing to the nearest toilet, overcome with nausea. Then things took a turn. The next day at work, Bob summoned me to his office. He explained that corporate wanted me to go to New York to update the branch office's security systems. I was puzzled. Me? Yes, they specifically requested you. They need you to fly out Monday and return Friday to update all the workstations and servers in the New York office. But Bob, that's not my job. I handle software updates. Bob shrugged. I don't know. I tried to explain that to them, but they insisted. It has to be you. It suddenly dawned on me. My wife's lover wanted me out of the picture for a few days, presumably for some quality time together. Resigned, I agreed, "Okay, Bob. I'll go." "Thanks. I've never seen corporate make demands like this before, and I hope it's not a trend," he added, handing me the airline tickets. As I took them, I realized this was just the beginning. As long as Larson was out of jail, this nonsense would continue. I resolved to step up my revenge plan. Later that evening, Mary and I sat down for dinner. The atmosphere at home had shifted recently. I'd been struggling to contain my frustration, and she'd been avoiding intimacy. I attempted to initiate some romantic moments, only to be met with rejection each time. Though I doubted my ability to follow through even if she had agreed, I wanted to keep up appearances. Casually, I mentioned my upcoming trip to New York for the following week. Mary feigned sadness at my departure. It was during this conversation that I inadvertently learned of Mary's deceit. She slipped up, expressing excitement about the theater next week, then quickly corrected herself, claiming she meant the movie theater with her friends to watch a chick flick. I chose to ignore the lie. My mind wandered to Larson's wife. If Mary was concocting excuses, surely she was too. I felt the need for scotch, using it more frequently as a numbing agent, a habit I recognized as unhealthy. Mary's involvement in this New York charade put her in my sights. The next day, I opened accounts in her name at 2 downtown banks. Before the weekend, I manipulated a few invoices online, redirecting funds to both Larson's and Mary's accounts. Their downfall was imminent. I sensed a shift within myself, a departure from the friendly persona I once portrayed. A darker side emerged, one I hadn't acknowledged before and wasn't sure I liked. Frustration crept in as I pondered why their accounting team hadn't caught on to the thefts yet. The journey to New York proved both captivating and instructive. However, the flight was unpleasant. I detest flying since 9/11. Air travel has become burdensome due to heightened security measures, resulting in prolonged wait times and exhaustion upon arrival. This trip followed the same pattern. Upon reaching the hotel, I immediately retired to rest. The next day, I promptly tended to office matters, completing updates by 2 p.m. However, the remainder of the trip was consumed by troubleshooting tasks, addressing issues such as worn cables, faulty graphic cards, and a malfunctioning hard drive. Ultimately, it felt like a waste of time, fueling my frustration with the affair between two individuals. Tuesday night found me confined to my hotel room, save for a brief visit to the Empire State Building, until my departure on Friday. Returning home on Friday evening, I greeted Mary with a brief kiss on the cheek before retiring to bed, sparing her the need to fabricate excuses to reject my advances. The New York trip made me reconsider my perspective on how this situation would ultimately unfold. What did I envision as the desired outcome, and what about Larson's wife Caroline? Over the following weeks, I had a few chances to access Larson's system. I hoped the auditors would catch on soon. The amount of money involved was substantial by now. Then I was sent to Denver. Bob informed me that the New York office was pleased with my work and wanted a similar effort in Denver. Bob seemed as puzzled as I was about the assignment. Arriving in Denver, I found the same situation. I spent a couple of days on basic system security training and the rest holed up in my hotel room. Using Mary's computer, I accessed the fraudulent bank accounts belonging to the lovers. Altogether, there was more than $1 million in them. It seemed inevitable that Mary and I would be divorcing. Then I pondered, does this money count as shared property? I chuckled inwardly, yet in the following days, thoughts of the money persisted. If I sued Larson, I could likely claim a substantial sum. Could I simply take this money and consider it fair? I wrestled with the implications. Would I be exchanging an unethical deed for an illegal one? Was I capable of such actions? They had destroyed my life, emasculated me. Was I even thinking clearly? Screw it, let's go for it. A week later, they sent me to Miami, but this time, I had a plan. I completed all the security upgrades by Tuesday and flew to the Bahamas on Wednesday morning. It was quite simple to open a bank account under Larson's name there. I made another trip to the Grand Cayman and opened a bank account under Mary's name. I returned to Miami in time for my flight home and arrived back at O'Hare thoroughly exhausted. I went straight to bed and didn't wake up until noon on Saturday. 2 weeks later, I found myself aboard a plane bound for Boston. While the logistics presented some challenges, I managed to carve out time to make a detour to Zurich to open a couple of accounts. Upon returning home, I commenced the process of transferring funds to these offshore accounts, occasionally shifting money between accounts at different intervals. This routine persisted for the following months. Every 3 weeks or so, I was dispatched on seemingly futile missions to cities like Seattle, Phoenix, and Atlanta. During one trip to Phoenix, I seized the opportunity to extend my journey to Mexico City to establish yet another offshore account. Back home, I routinely accessed Larson's accounting system, tweaking invoices and rerouting funds through local banks before sending them offshore. The intricacies of planning and executing these maneuvers became a source of solace amidst the chaos. Meanwhile, my relationship with Mary had dwindled into one resembling roommates. Our interactions were limited to moments when our lives intersected, as she guarded her own world from my scrutiny. Despite my efforts to bridge the gap, our connection remained strained. Every attempt at closeness seemed to provoke arguments, often stemming from trivial matters like the arrangement of dishes in the dishwasher or the placement of a coffee cup. I couldn't shake the feeling that these disputes were deliberately manufactured to withhold affection from me. In November, there was a cunning incident. I took pride in managing to access Mary's schedule and noticed a lunch appointment with Larson. When their lunch hour began, I bought a dozen roses and headed to her office. The women there admired the flowers and praised me as a thoughtful husband, but sadly, Mary was in a meeting. Since they were leaving for lunch, I asked if I could leave the flowers on her desk, which they allowed. Once inside Mary's office, I closed the door swiftly and sat at her desk, logging into her computer. I made adjustments to a couple of invoices and accessed her bank account. Knowing it would leave a trace, I figured this could serve as evidence if auditors ever caught wind of anything suspicious. Then, I repeated the process in Larson's office. While on Larson's computer, I took the opportunity to explore further. Deep within, I stumbled upon a folder containing explicit images of Mary in various poses. It stung, though not as intensely as it did initially when I discovered the affair. I copied the folder onto a thumb drive I always carry and left without a sound. When I arrived home that evening, Mary was ecstatic about the roses, finding them incredibly romantic. I even received a special favor from her as a result. Well, a favor is a favor, and I never refuse one. It turned out to be one of the most enjoyable nights we'd had in a while. However, I couldn't shake the awareness that the next day would bring me back to the reality of my wife, her lover, and myself. About a month later, I mentioned to Mary that I was planning to enroll in a French course at the nearby community college. The classes were scheduled for Tuesday and Thursday evenings. She was visibly thrilled at the prospect of 2 more evenings with her lover. This decision was part of my strategy to gradually disengage, and any time away from Mary alleviated some of the stress. Despite my fabricated work trips, I managed to attend the classes without difficulty. I communicated with the instructor, who was understanding, and ultimately earned a B in the course. The affair showed no signs of slowing down, and the auditors remained oblivious. I couldn't help but ponder how these individuals achieved such success. Then I recalled Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, but that's beside the point. I had a sense that things were wrapping up soon. Mary's company needed to finalize their financial records by the end of the fiscal year, including tracking down any missing money, and they managed to do so while I was away on a trip. Mary phoned me in a panic. I was lounging by the hotel pool in Los Angeles when her call came through. She mentioned an ongoing audit and that she would be delayed, advising me not to attempt to reach her that evening. I calmly sipped my banana cocktail and reassured her, saying, "Of course, dear. Best of luck." Swiftly, I enacted my exit plan. I transferred the funds to an account in Mexico and caught a flight there. I withdrew all the money in bearer bonds and secured them in a safety deposit box in Los Angeles. Around noon, Mary called me, reporting some complications and asking if I could return home promptly. I informed her that I was still tied up with security matters but would aim to be back by Thursday. I ordered another round of banana drinks and grinned to myself. It seemed the storm had finally hit. The following day, online news outlets reported their arrest. Headlines proclaimed high-ranking executive and lover involved in large-scale fraud. The accompanying images were unflattering. The report revealed that funds had been diverted from multiple accounts for personal use by the mistress. It further mentioned that investigators had traced some of the money to the Grand Cayman Islands and intended to liaise with local authorities for access to the accounts. Bail was set at $1 million each. Returning home on Thursday night, I was at the courthouse bright and early on Friday morning. I leveraged the house as collateral for the bail, and by around 2 p.m., Mary was released into my custody. We drove home in silence, Mary's tears the only sound. Once we arrived, she rushed upstairs for a shower, claiming she needed to rid herself of the smell of jail. Memories flooded back of a similar dash to the shower after last year's awards dinner. I poured myself a scotch and waited downstairs. A few minutes later, Mary descended, wearing a lengthy bathrobe. Seating herself opposite me, she clarified that she was innocent, having not taken any money, and remained silent on the affair, neither confirming nor denying it. I refrained from broaching the topic, suggesting it might be a misunderstanding, and assured her we'd enlist legal representation to contest it. The atmosphere at home turned chilly as we awaited the trial. Mary spoke sparingly, avoiding any mention of Larson. My routine continued monotonously, going to work and returning home, nothing more. Larson opted to challenge the accusations alongside Mary, meeting occasionally with their lawyer. Beyond that, Mary rarely ventured out. Whether their affair persisted remained unclear to me, though I learned Larson's wife, Caroline, sought a divorce. Mary made efforts to be amicable towards me. Typically, she had a meal prepared upon my return, though she never broached the topic of Larson or the previous year. I presumed she aimed to bury the past and salvage our relationship. She made a couple of attempts to seduce me, which I obliged. I kept up with the case through newspapers while at work. According to reports, federal authorities traced the money trail from the Cayman Islands to Zurich and then to Mexico, but they lost track of it there. Despite their efforts, no funds had been recovered yet. I half expected the police to show up and arrest me, but so far, nothing had happened. As the trial approached, Mary made more of an effort to please me, but it was too late. I consulted a divorce lawyer and had the paperwork prepared. The trial was brief, lasting only 3 days. By then, the media had moved on to other scandals, forgetting about this one. During the trial, Mary and Larson sat at opposite ends of the defendant's table, separated by their attorneys. I attended all 3 days, listening as the auditors detailed the crime and traced the money. The prosecution built a strong case linking transactions to Mary's and Larson's computer logins. Although the defense argued that their passwords might have been hacked, the prosecution successfully tied the transactions to their devices. It was clear they were both in trouble. The prosecution painted Larson as controlling and manipulative while portraying Mary as a naive accomplice. I believe the jury found their arguments convincing. After 3 days, the jury withdrew to deliberate on the verdict. Mary and I located a small meeting room and sat down. I was eager to bring this to a close. I reached into my pocket and extracted the divorce papers, citing irreconcilable differences as the reason. Mary accepted them with a heavy heart. I intended to cite adultery, I confessed. Mary interjected quickly, but that was never proven. Yet I have evidence, I replied, pulling out a handful of photographs from my pocket. I handed her the first one from the stack, depicting Caroline and me at the top of the Empire State Building. I'm not accusing you of adultery, but rather myself, I confessed. Last year, on the day of the awards dinner, Larson's wife Caroline came to my office. She had hired a private investigator to follow her husband and had evidence of his infidelities. I initially dismissed her claims, refusing to believe until the dinner itself. It was then that I saw you two together, confirming her suspicions. I was devastated. I later emailed her to apologize. When Larson sent me to New York with you, I understood the true purpose of the trip, for you two to be together. I wondered how you managed to get Caroline out of town. To my surprise, she appeared at my hotel room door one Tuesday night. We spent the evening drinking wine, sharing our pain, and discovering the extent of Larson's deceit. Caroline revealed that your phone calls regarding my trip had been recorded by the private investigator. She volunteered to leave town to visit her mother before Larson had to concoct a reason. Our time in New York was spent mostly confined to the hotel room, apart from a visit to the Empire State Building where Caroline played the role of tour guide. Despite what you may think, Caroline and I maintained a strict boundary and did not engage in any physical contact during that time. I handed her a few additional photographs. They depicted Caroline and me in Denver. She turned up in Denver, playing some of the recordings of you and your partner, mostly the ones where he was persuading you to cut me off from intimacy. It was then that I understood why our intimate life had withered away. It was over a bottle of scotch that Caroline and I found solace in each other's arms. Caroline and I weren't in love, we were simply two lost souls brought together by the actions of our partners. Together, we attempted to mend the wounds inflicted by Larson and you. I spread out more pictures of Caroline and me taken in Seattle, Phoenix, and Boston. These images captured Caroline and me enjoying the sights and locations that Mary and I had discussed. By then, we were evolving into good friends with benefits. I remarked afterward. I presented her with the photos from Miami, depicting Caroline in a bikini, looking stunning. Additionally, there was another girl featured in the images. That other girl you see is a close friend of Caroline's. Remember when I mentioned my fantasy of being with two girls at once? Well, let me tell you, it lived up to every expectation. Mary was devastated, tears welling up in her eyes. I felt remorseful too. If only she had confessed her indiscretions earlier, perhaps we could have worked through it. If she had approached me long ago expressing her desire to end our marriage for Larson, I would have been hurt but not as shattered as I am now. I regret the entire situation. As I rose to depart, I bid goodbye, Mary, I once loved you, and with that, I left. By the time the verdict was announced, I had finished packing everything. Both of them were found guilty. Since none of the money was recovered, Larson received a 7-year sentence, and Mary was sentenced to 3 years in prison and 2 years of probation. My lawyer had the authority to sell the house and all its remaining contents. I instructed him to pack up all of Mary's belongings and place them in storage. The proceeds from the house were to be placed in an escrow account for Mary, along with half of the savings. I was on a plane to France by midnight. As I sat on my balcony overlooking the Côte d'Azur, I could see the beach from my vantage point, although I was 3 blocks away. I walked there almost every day. As I sat enjoying a fine bottle of Côte d'Azur wine, I reflected on that particular year. After relocating to the south of France, I hadn't returned to the States for over a year, not since the verdict. There had been no contact with Mary. I found myself becoming a solitary figure here in my chateau. I refer to it as such, though it's really just a modest house. Still, it belongs to me. Caroline has dropped by a few times, but our connection won't progress beyond being friends with benefits. Granted, the benefits are quite good. On one occasion, her friend joined us, and the experience was just as enjoyable the second time around. Caroline's divorce went smoothly, and she'll bring joy to some fortunate bachelor, provided he can overcome her trust issues. She was aware of my plan to settle things with Larson and Mary, and she found it fitting for both of them. Content with her life, she's moving forward. As for me, I have my own challenges. Though I don't need to work due to my ill-gotten gains, I've started a small online business. I develop software for system integration, similar to what I did for Bob. I can manage it all remotely. I've secured a few contracts, keeping me occupied, and even received an email from Bob who acknowledged my work and offered to refer some clients. I expressed my gratitude. The ladies at the patisserie find my attempts at speaking French amusing, and they try to teach me more words each day. I reckon I'll have it mastered by the time I'm a century old. I've made progress in coping with Mary's betrayal and our divorce, but I'm struggling more to rationalize my own choices. I recall studying a case during my college psychology class. It detailed the disappearance of a husband who resurfaced years later. According to the case, he vanished after leaving work one day. He lived in the San Francisco Bay Area with his wife and 2 young children. His early departure from work coincided with a World Series game between the Oakland Athletics and the San Francisco Giants. The case study recounted how, as he departed his workplace, the Loma Prieta earthquake hit. He narrowly escaped death as bricks and sizable debris from the building fell on either side of him. In that moment, he grasped the seriousness of the situation, which shocked him into full awareness. Reflecting on his life, he realized his profound unhappiness and the unfulfilled desires he had. Without speaking, he quickly packed his belongings and left his wife and children. About 4 years later, authorities found the man, who had since remarried happily and had 1 child. Upon his arrest, he underwent a psychological evaluation. The psychiatrist determined that the man's near-death experience had significantly changed his outlook. He began to see the world as inherently unstable, with death always a possibility. As a result, he abandoned his responsibilities and fled. However, over time, he gradually understood on a subconscious level that he did not live in a reality where death was constantly imminent. Thus, he slowly returned to his previous contented life, becoming a happily married family man once more. Maybe that's my reality. When I was in love and trusted those I cared about, I upheld integrity and honesty. I filed taxes correctly, never lied, and never thought of others. Mary meant everything to me. My love for her was complete, but the pain of losing a loved one, especially through betrayal, is the deepest cut. It's a pain that embeds in the soul and constricts the heart. With a sudden shift in my world, I became someone unrecognizable. I'm not happy this version of me exists. Now, I face decisions. Do I remain isolated, shielding my soul from the darker aspects within, or do I cautiously allow others back in, gradually reintroducing the better side of myself to the world? The answer is unclear. However, that little blonde girl at the patisserie does catch my eye.